I took my son to visit my mom, but my husband's truck was there. I sneaked to the window, and what I heard him, my mother, and my own stepsister plotting. It didn't just shatter my world, it burned it to the ground. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I stood frozen behind my mother's kitchen window. My 11-year-old son, Owen, was gripping my hand so tight it hurt. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could compare to the pain slicing through my chest as I listened to the three people I trusted most in this world destroy everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. She's so broken, Beverly. Always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore. My husband Russell's voice, the voice that had promised to cherish me forever, carried through the thin glass like a shard of ice to my heart. My mother's laugh was sharp and cruel, a sound I knew all too well. I told you not to marry her, didn't I, Russell? I always said she was too weak for a man like you. Too damaged. Then, a third voice joined in, a voice that was supposed to be my friend, my confidant, my sister. My stepsister, Adrienne. Her tone was like honey laced with poison. She's just so weak. It's draining to be around. You need a real woman, Russell. Someone who can stand by your side, not hide behind you. Someone like me. The words hit me like physical blows. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the rough brick of the house to stay upright. Owen looked up at me with his big, confused eyes, sensing that something terrible was happening, but not understanding what. I pressed my finger to my lips, signaling for him to stay quiet, even as my whole world was crumbling around us. The inheritance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while, Russell continued, his voice so casual, like he was talking about the weather. But now that's almost gone. I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic. I had to grip the windowsill to keep from falling. The inheritance money. The money I thought we'd been saving for Owen's college fund. The money that was supposed to secure our future. He'd been using me. This whole time. What are you going to do about it? My mother asked. I could hear the excitement in her voice, like she was watching her favorite soap opera unfold. I'm going to leave her, Russell declared. Take everything. Adrienne and I have a plan. She's so weak and broken, she won't even fight me. She'll just cry and accept it, like she always does. And I'll be right there to help you pick up the pieces, darling, Adrienne cooed. We'll make this house a real home. Our home. That's when something inside me died. The part of me that still believed in goodness, in love, in family. But from those ashes, something else was born. Something cold, calculating, and silent. Something that would make sure Russell, my mother Beverly, and my dear stepsister Adrienne learned exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. I pulled Owen away from the window and walked quietly to my car, my mind already spinning. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. But before that moment, before the world tilted on its axis, life was, well, I thought it was perfect. Or as perfect as it could be for someone like me. For most of my 32 years, I had walked through life believing I wasn't quite good enough for the good things that happened to me. We lived in a cozy 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. It was the house Russell and I had bought when Owen was just a toddler, the house where I pictured us growing old together, watching our grandchildren play in the yard. Every morning started the same. I'd stumble into the kitchen, and Russell would already be up, showered, dressed in his crisp work shirt. He managed a small construction company, a business he'd built from the ground up, and everyone in town respected him for it. Morning, beautiful, he'd say, kissing my forehead. Coffee's ready. And it always was, with the perfect amount of cream, just the way I liked it. He remembered the little things. Or so I thought. My stepsister, Adrienne, was a constant fixture in our lives. My father had married her mother when I was a teenager, and after her mom passed away, my own mother, Beverly, took Adrienne under her wing as if she were her own flesh and blood. Adrienne was everything I wasn't: outgoing, confident, a real go-getter, as Russell often said. She'd pop over unannounced with a freshly baked pie or a new board game for Owen. "Just wanted to brighten your day," she'd chirp, her smile wide and dazzling. I remember one Saturday afternoon, she came over to help me pick an outfit for a community fundraiser. I pulled out a simple, elegant navy dress. "Oh, that's nice, Mare," she said, tilting her head. "But is it, you?" "It's a little severe." She then pulled a beige, shapeless dress from the back of my closet. "Now this. This is so soft and gentle. It's perfect for you." I ended up wearing the beige dress. I felt like a sack of potatoes, but Adrienne gushed about how sweet I looked, and Russell agreed. Looking back, I see she wasn't dressing me, she was neutralizing me. My mother, Beverly, doted on Adrienne. The favoritism was a constant, low hum in the background of my life. I remember when I was 16, I won second place in a statewide essay contest. I was so proud. I showed my mom the certificate. She smiled faintly and said, "That's nice, dear." The very next week, Adrienne, who was a year younger, won a small, local track meet. My mother threw a party for her. She had a banner made. When I looked hurt, my mother just said, "Well, Meredith, Adrienne's accomplishment is so physical. So dynamic. You understand." I did understand. I understood that my achievements would always be quiet and beige, while Adrienne's would be celebrated in full, vibrant color. This dynamic continued into our adult lives. At family dinners, the conversation always revolved around Adrienne's latest promotion, her new car, her exciting social life. Russell would hang on her every word. "Wow, Addie, that's incredible," he'd say. "You're a real powerhouse." Then he would turn to me, pat my hand, and say, "And my Meredith keeps our whole world running. Don't know what I'd do without her." It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It was a consolation prize. He was praising me for being the stage crew, while Adrienne was the star of the show. And I had accepted that role, because I thought that was all I deserved. The comfortable blanket of my ignorance started to unravel about 3 months before that day at the window. It began with whispers. I was at the local library where I worked part-time, a quiet sanctuary for me. I was shelving books in the fiction aisle when I overheard 2 of the other librarians, Janice and Myra, talking by the front desk. "Saw Russell Miller at the corner bistro yesterday," Janice said, her voice low and gossipy. "He was with his mother-in-law, Beverly. And that stepsister, Adrienne." "Oh," Myra replied, her voice filled with intrigue. "The 3 of them?" "All 3, Janice confirmed. And listen to this. They weren't just eating. They had papers spread out all over the table. They looked so intense, heads together, whispering. Looked more like a power trio planning a merger than a family outing." My hands froze on the spine of a novel. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Papers? A merger? It made no sense. I ducked behind a shelf, my heart starting to pound. I told myself it was nothing. It was probably just business advice. Yes, that had to be it. But the image of them, heads together, whispering, stuck with me. That evening, I decided to ask about it. I tried to sound casual. "Hey, honey," I said as we were cleaning up after dinner. "Janice from the library said she saw you at the corner bistro yesterday with Mom and Adrienne." Russell didn't even look up from the dish he was drying. "Yeah? So?" "She just said you guys looked really intense, like you were having a big meeting." "What was it about?" He stopped drying the plate and looked at me. His smile was patient, but his eyes were cold. "Honey, are you feeling all right? You seem a little on edge lately. It was just lunch. Beverly wanted our opinion on some home repairs and Adrian was talking about her stock portfolio. We were just looking at some brochures. Is that a problem? I immediately felt foolish. No, of course not. I was just curious. He had turned it around so smoothly, making me the paranoid one, the one who was on edge. I dropped the subject. But then the other things started. Russell, who used to leave his phone lying around, now kept it with him everywhere. He changed his passcode. One evening, I saw him texting, and he quickly angled the screen away when I walked into the room. Adrian started calling his cell directly, more and more often. Once, I picked up the house phone to make a call, and I heard her on the line with him. Just make sure she doesn't see the paperwork, she was saying. When he realized I was on the line, he'd quickly said, "Hey, honey, just talking to Addie about a surprise for you." The surprise never came. One evening, he came home late, his clothes covered in dust. "Long day at the Jackson site," he sighed, collapsing onto the couch. "This renovation is killing me." But later that night, when I was taking out the trash, I noticed his work truck in the driveway. It was spotless. There wasn't a speck of dust or mud on it. It looked like it had just come from a car wash. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. It was a feeling I couldn't name, a puzzle where none of the pieces fit right. I was living in a house full of secrets, and I was the only one who didn't know the punchline. And that brings us back to that Thursday afternoon, standing behind the rose bushes in my mother's backyard, my world imploding. After the initial shock of their words washed over me, a horrifying clarity took its place. I wasn't just listening to a betrayal, I was listening to the detailed blueprint of my own destruction. The casual cruelty of it was what took my breath away. They spoke about me as if I were an inconvenience, an object to be disposed of. "The inheritance has to be handled carefully," Russell was saying, his voice low and conspiratorial. I strained to hear every venomous word. "Most of it is in a joint savings account. I've already moved a good chunk of it, but the big withdrawal will raise flags. We need her signature. She'll sign anything you put in front of her if you tell her it's for Owen's future," my mother, Beverly, said with sickening confidence. "She's always been a fool for that boy. She wasn't wrong. I would do anything for my son. And they knew it." I could feel the bile rise in my throat. My love for my son was just another tool for them to use against me. Then Adrian spoke, her voice laced with a chilling practicality. "What about the house, Russell? Her name is on the deed too." "I've been working on that," he said, and I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. "Been having her sign a lot of insurance updates and business documents lately. A few of those were refinancing papers. By the time we file for the divorce, most of the equity will be tied up in a loan that's in an account I control." The world tilted. The home I had lovingly decorated, the garden I had tended, the walls that held all of Owen's childhood memories, they were methodically stealing it from right under my nose. But the worst was yet to come. "And custody?" my mother asked. "You have to get full custody of Owen. I can't have that weak woman raising my only grandson." Russell let out a short, cold laugh. "Don't you worry. Who's going to give a child to a woman with a history of depression and anxiety? My lawyers already told me how to play it. Every time she cries, every time she gets overwhelmed, I've been making a note of it. I have a whole journal. By the time we get to court, she'll look like an unstable wreck who's unfit to be a mother." My blood ran cold. My struggles with anxiety after my father's death. I had confided in Russell, cried on his shoulder. He had held me and told me I was strong. He had encouraged me to see a therapist. And all that time, he wasn't supporting me. He was collecting evidence. He was building a cage around me, and I had handed him the bars, one tear at a time. Once she's gone, Adrian whispered, her voice full of a triumphant hunger, I'll move in right away. Owen already loves me. It'll be an easy transition. We can finally be the family we were always meant to be. That was it. That was the moment the last shred of hope inside me withered and died. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't just an affair. This was a hostile takeover of my entire life, orchestrated by the three people who were supposed to love me most. They weren't just planning to leave me, they were planning to erase me. I drove home on autopilot, Owen chattering in the backseat about a new level he'd reached in a video game. I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was the echo of their voices. I went through the motions of a normal evening. I made Owen his favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese. I remember watching him eat, his face so innocent, and feeling a fierce, protective love that was so powerful it physically hurt. He was the only thing in my life that was real. And they were going to try to take him from me. After I tucked him into bed, I didn't sit and cry. I didn't collapse. The grief was a physical weight, but the rage was a fire, and it was burning away the weakness. I walked into the living room and sat in the dark for hours, just thinking. The hurt was still there, a deep, cavernous wound. But for the first time in my life, I felt something else alongside it, clarity. That night, after Russell came home, feigning exhaustion from his hard day's work, I waited until his breathing was deep and even. Then I slipped out of bed and went to our home office. He always said I was too emotional to handle the finances, so he managed everything. The filing cabinet was his domain, a place I'd never had a reason to look through. Until now. My hands were shaking as I pulled open the drawer marked financials. The cold metal felt alien. I started digging. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. The statements for our joint savings account, the one holding my father's inheritance, showed a series of large, systematic withdrawals over the past 6 months, totaling nearly $70,000. The recipient account wasn't one I recognized. I kept digging. My breath caught in my throat when I found a credit card statement I'd never seen before, for a card under Russell's name only. I scanned the charges. There were fancy restaurants I'd never been to, weekend trips to cities I'd never visited. And then I saw it, a charge for $4,000 to a high-end jeweler. It was dated a week after Adrienne's birthday. I felt a wave of nausea. He had bought my stepsister a diamond necklace with my father's money. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I found a folder tucked way in the back, labeled ANR Properties. My heart hammered against my ribs. A for Adrian. R for Russell. Inside were documents for a shell corporation. They had started a company together. They weren't just planning to take my money, they were already laundering it. I sat there on the floor of the office until the sun began to stream through the blinds, surrounded by the paper trail of my life's destruction. But I wasn't crying. I was thinking. Calculating. The weak, trusting Meredith was gone, burned away by the truth. In her place was a woman they had created. A woman who now had one single, all-consuming purpose, to take back everything they had stolen, and then, to watch them burn. The plan began to form in my mind, piece by meticulous piece. They thought they were playing checkers with a pawn. They were about to find out they had declared war on a queen. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I called in sick to the library. The old Meredith would have felt guilty, but the new me knew I had a more important job to do. After Russell left for his fake job and Owen was on the school bus, my real work began. My first stop was the bank. I walked in, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I kept my face calm. I asked to speak with the branch manager, Mr. Thompson, a man who had known me for years. I played the part of a slightly confused wife. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice carefully measured, Russell and I have been discussing our investments, and I seem to have misplaced the statements for one of our accounts. I can't seem to find it in our online portal. I gave him the account number I had found on the statements the night before. He typed for a few moments, his brow furrowed. Ah, yes. The ANR Properties account. Well, Mrs. Miller, the reason you can't see it is because your name isn't on it. It's a business account registered to Mr. Russell Miller and Ms. Adrian Scott. He said it so matter-of-factly. I feigned surprise. Oh. Of course. Adrian is my stepsister. They must be working on a project together. Russell mentioned it. My mistake. I smiled, a tight, brittle thing. Could you just print out a list of the recent transfers from our joint savings account? I just need it for our records. He obliged. I walked out of that bank with a crisp, official document detailing every single dollar they had siphoned away from me. The first piece of my arsenal. My next stop was not my home computer. I knew better than that. I drove to the public library in the next town over, where no one would recognize me. I sat in a secluded corral and for 4 straight hours, I dived into a world I knew nothing about. I searched for terms like spousal financial fraud, divorce asset hiding, and adultery proof for custody. I learned about forensic accounting. I learned about conspiracy. Most importantly, I learned that what Russell and Adrian were doing wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. Before I left, I stopped at an electronics store. I felt completely out of place. I walked up to a young clerk with multiple piercings. Hi, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need a small camera. For home security. Like a nanny cam? He asked. Sort of. But smaller. Something no one would notice. He showed me a few options. I chose a tiny one, cleverly disguised as a digital clock. Then I asked about voice recorders. I picked one that was the size of a car key fob. As I paid in cash, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer just a victim. I was an investigator. I was gathering the evidence that would become their downfall. This wasn't just about getting a fair divorce anymore. This was about justice. The time for passive observation was over. It was time to set the stage. That Friday, I called my mother. I pitched my voice to sound small, a little lonely, the way they expected me to sound. Mom? I began, I was wondering, would you and Adrian like to come over for dinner tomorrow night? Russell and I would love to have you. I could practically hear the smug satisfaction in her voice. Oh, Meredith, sweetie, that sounds lovely. Is everything all right? You sound a little down. Poor, pathetic Meredith, reaching out for the family that was plotting her demise. I'm fine, I said, injecting a hint of weariness. Just tired. Russell's been working so hard. I just think it would be nice for us all to be together. Of course, dear. We'll be there. The next day, I cleaned the house until it sparkled. I prepared Russell's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes and carrots. I even baked an apple pie from scratch. I was the perfect housewife preparing for a perfect family dinner. But while the roast was in the oven, I was busy with other preparations. The tiny camera, disguised as a clock, went on the mantelpiece in the living room, with a perfect view of the sofa. The digital recorder was fully charged and resting in the pocket of my apron. They arrived together, Beverly and Adrian, bearing a bottle of expensive wine and fake smiles. Adrian hugged me tightly. Mare, you look exhausted, she whispered, her voice dripping with false concern. You need to take care of yourself. It was a classic move, a criticism disguised as care. The dinner was torture. It was like watching a play where I was the only one who knew the script. They had inside jokes I wasn't a part of. They exchanged glances over my head. At one point, Beverly turned to Russell. Did you ever get that permit issue sorted out with the city for the Elm Street project? My blood ran cold. Russell hadn't mentioned an Elm Street project to me. But he answered easily, "Yeah, finally got it handled." It was a nightmare. I looked at my mother, then at him. "What project is that?" I asked, my voice a model of innocent curiosity. "Just work stuff, babe," Russell said dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about." Adrian jumped in. "It's a huge deal, Mayor. A commercial building. Russell is a genius for landing it." She looked at him with such adoration it made my stomach turn. After dinner, we moved to the living room, right into the camera's line of sight. I served coffee, my hands steady. Owen came down to say goodnight, and I watched as Beverly and Adrian showered him with affection that felt cloying and false. After he went to bed, I excused myself to the kitchen to get the pie, leaving the recorder on the counter. When I returned, Adrian was sitting a little too close to Russell on the couch. She had her hand on his arm. They moved apart quickly when they saw me. The rest of the evening was a blur of their condescending advice and my placid smiles. When they finally left, Adrian gave me another hug. "We should do this more often," she said. "Definitely," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "Family is so important." That night, after Russell was asleep, I retrieved my devices. The video footage was damning, the casual intimacy, the shared glances, the way they moved as a unit. But the audio from the kitchen was the real prize. I heard Adrienne's hushed voice clearly. "How much longer do we have to keep pretending? I can't stand seeing him with her." And my mother's reply, cold and clear. "Patience, dear. The bigger the inheritance, the better our new life will be. Just play your part a little longer." I had them. I had their greed, their contempt, their conspiracy, all recorded in crystal clear audio. I knew I had enough to file for divorce, enough to fight for my share. But a part of me, the part that was now cold and methodical, knew I needed more. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted them to face consequences for the laws they had broken. To do that, I needed undeniable proof of the affair, something that went beyond intimate glances on a sofa. It was time to bring in a professional. Finding a private investigator felt like something out of a movie. I searched online for PIS in the next county over and found one with discreet, professional reviews. His name was Harvey, a former police detective with tired eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. We met in a quiet diner. "So," he said, after I'd given him the basics. "You think your husband is sleeping with your stepsister?" "I know he is," I said. "I just need proof. Photos. Something undeniable." I slid a folder across the table. It contained photos of them and their schedules. He barely glanced at it. "It'll cost you," he grunted. "I have money," I said, my voice firm. It was my father's money, and I was finally using it to protect myself. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The following Wednesday, Russell announced he'd be working late again. "Big deadline on the Elm Street project," he said, kissing my forehead. "Might not be home until after midnight." As soon as he left, I called Harvey. "He's on the move." This time, I didn't follow him myself. I let the professional do his work. I spent the evening in a state of suspended animation. I tried to help Owen with a school project, building a diorama of the solar system, but all I could think about was the dark universe of my marriage. After Owen went to bed, I tried to cook dinner for myself, but I was so distracted I burned the chicken. I ended up just staring at the wall, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I saw my best friend Sylvia's name pop up on my phone, but I ignored the call. I couldn't pretend to be okay, not tonight. Just after 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from Harvey. The subject line was simple: proof. My hands were shaking as I opened it. There were 5 photos attached. The first showed Russell's truck parked outside a seedy motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. The second photo showed Adrienne's car parked right next to it. The third, time-stamped at 8:47 p.m., was a clear shot, taken with a telephoto lens, through a gap in the curtains of room 237. It was them. There was no mistaking it. But the last two photos were the ones that shattered any lingering shred of doubt. They were taken when Russell and Adrienne were leaving the room. They weren't sneaking around. They were casual, comfortable. In the first, Russell had his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, pulling her close. In the second, she had her head thrown back, laughing, as he leaned in and kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss that was filled with a history I had never been a part of. They looked like a real couple. I saved the photos to a secure drive and then deleted the email. I sat in the dark for a long time, just staring at the wall. There was no pain left. There was only a hollow, echoing emptiness. And a resolve as hard as steel. The evidence was overwhelming. I had the financial fraud, the conspiracy, and now, the affair. I could have ended it right then. I could have called my lawyer and brought the whole house of cards crashing down. But they had planned to leave me with nothing. They had plotted to paint me as an unfit mother to take my son. A simple divorce felt insufficient. I wanted them to dig their own graves a little deeper. I wanted their greed to be the shovel. That Friday evening, I set the trap. I cooked another one of Russell's favorite dinners. This time, I wore a new black dress I had bought, the first piece of clothing I'd purchased for myself in years that wasn't purely practical. I even put on makeup. He noticed immediately. "Wow," he said, his eyes roaming over me. "You look amazing tonight. What's the occasion?" I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Do I need an occasion to look nice for my husband?" I asked sweetly. Over dinner, between bites of steak, I casually dropped the bait. "I had the most interesting phone call today," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. It was from my dad's estate lawyer. Russell's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Oh. Everything okay?" "More than okay," I said, letting a little excitement creep into my voice. Apparently, there was an old investment portfolio of his that got missed during the initial probate. Some old tech stocks from the 90s. The lawyer said, well, he said it could be worth a significant amount. A substantial inheritance I never knew about. I watched his face carefully. It was a masterclass in controlled emotion. But I saw it. The flicker of surprise, followed by a flash of pure, unadulterated greed in his eyes. He quickly masked it with a look of concern. "Sweetheart, that's incredible. But are you sure? We shouldn't get our hopes up." "Oh, I know," I said, waving my hand dismissively. But he seemed pretty confident. He said the final paperwork should be done in a few weeks. It could be another $100,000, maybe more. The number hung in the air between us. $100,000. "That's wonderful, Meredith." "Truly wonderful," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. The next day, Adrienne called me, her voice bubbly. "Mare. Russell told me the amazing news about the inheritance. I am so thrilled for you. You deserve it." Her fake excitement was nauseating. She was fishing for details, trying to confirm if the prize was real. I played along, sounding giddy and a little overwhelmed. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. Around 2 a.m., I heard him slip out of bed. I crept to our bedroom door, which I had left slightly ajar, my digital recorder in hand. I heard him whispering urgently into his phone in the kitchen. "Beverly, yeah, it's me," he hissed. "We have to wait. Postpone everything." There was a pause. "No, I'm serious. She says there's more money coming. A lot more. Another inheritance." Maybe 100 grand. Another pause. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's too stupid to put it together. Just tell Adrian to be patient. A few more weeks of this charade will be worth it. We can bleed her completely dry. I crept back to bed, a grim smile on my face. Hook, line, and sinker. They were going to delay their own plans, all for a pile of money that didn't exist. Their own greed would keep them trapped right where I wanted them, giving me all the time I needed to prepare my final move. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. Not because of what they were doing, but because of the acting required on my part. Every morning, I woke up and put on the mask of the old Meredith, anxious, grateful for any scrap of attention. I cooked, I cleaned, I played the part of the devoted wife, all while the clock was ticking down on their lives as they knew it. Meanwhile, I was a whirlwind of focused activity. I had my final meetings with my new lawyer, a sharp, formidable woman named Daisy Walsh. I had chosen her specifically because her office was in the city, an hour away, and she had no connections to our small town. I'll never forget our last meeting before I gave her the green light. I had laid everything out on her polished mahogany desk, the bank statements, the printouts of the secret corporation, the high-resolution photos from the motel, the USB drive with the audio recordings. She had spent nearly an hour reviewing it all in silence, her expression growing more grim with each document. Finally, she took off her reading glasses and looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and respect. "Meredith," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "In my 20 years of practicing family law, I have never seen a more thorough, more damning collection of evidence against a spouse. This isn't just grounds for a divorce. This is a criminal case." "I know," I said. "He forged your signature on refinancing documents. He systematically moved tens of thousands of dollars of your inheritance into a secret account with his mistress. They conspired to commit fraud. And this plan to fabricate a history of mental instability to gain custody, that is malicious in the extreme." She shook her head. "We can file for divorce immediately. I can have a judge issue an ex parte order to freeze every single one of their accounts by the end of business tomorrow. He won't be able to access a dime." "And the house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The fraudulent refinancing is void. The house is safe. It's yours." She paused. "And custody of Owen. Meredith, he doesn't have a prayer. At best, he'll get supervised visitation." I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me. Owen was safe. That was all that mattered. "There's one last thing to consider," Daisy said gently. "The criminal aspect. Filing for divorce is one thing. Pressing charges is another. It will get messy. It will be public. You need to be sure." I thought about my father, who had worked his whole life to leave me that money, to ensure my future was secure. I thought about Owen, and the cold-blooded plan to steal him from me. I thought about my mother's cruel laughter and Adrienne's triumphant smile. I thought about all the years I had spent feeling small and worthless, a feeling they had so carefully cultivated. I looked Daisy straight in the eye. My voice, when it came out, was clear and steady. "Press charges. Against all of them." The plan was set. Daisy would file everything first thing Friday morning. A process server was scheduled to deliver the divorce papers and the court order freezing their assets to Russell at 10 a.m. Daisy had found out the address of the empty warehouse he was pretending to renovate as his Elm Street project. He would be served there, alone. I took Owen to school that morning and gave him an extra long hug. "I love you so much, sweetheart," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. He had no idea our lives were about to change forever. Instead of going home, I drove to a small coffee shop across town and waited. My hands trembled as I held my cup. Every noise made me jump. At 10:15, my phone remained silent. At 10:30, still nothing. The anxiety was suffocating. What if something went wrong? Then, at 10:47, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I answered. "Mrs. Miller," a man's voice said, calm and professional. "This is Officer Johnson with the Riverside Police Department. Your husband, Russell Miller, asked us to call you." My blood ran cold. The police? This wasn't part of the plan. Is everything all right, officer?" I managed to stammer. "Well, ma'am, that's what we're trying to figure out. Your husband was served with some legal papers this morning, and he's pretty upset. He's here at the station making some very serious accusations about you, and we wanted to get your side of the story." Even now. Even cornered, he was still trying to play his card. "What kind of accusations?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "He says you've been acting erratically for weeks, ma'am. That you fabricated a story about an inheritance to manipulate him. He's claiming you're mentally unstable and that he's deeply concerned for your safety and for the safety of your son." I almost laughed. The nerve. The absolute, unmitigated gall. He was executing the very plan I had recorded him creating. Right then, as I was holding that phone, my heart hammering in my chest, I knew this was the final move in the chess game. And I knew I wasn't alone in this. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen to how I finished my story. I took a deep, steadying breath. The panic was gone, replaced by an icy calm. "Officer Johnson," I said, my voice as clear as a bell. "I think you should know that those legal papers are divorce documents, which I filed because I have irrefutable proof that my husband has been embezzling my inheritance and having an affair with my stepsister, all with the help of my mother." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Your stepsister?" he finally said. "And my mother," I confirmed. "I have bank records, photographs, and audio recordings of them plotting to defraud me and fabricate a story about my mental state in order to gain full custody of my son. I'd be happy to bring my evidence to the station. In fact, I'm on my way right now." I hung up before he could respond. The drive to the police station was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I walked into the lobby, and I could hear Russell's voice bellowing from an interrogation room in the back. "She's delusional. You have to protect my son from her." Officer Johnson met me at the front desk. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes that had seen too much. He led me to a small, quiet interview room. The room smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. A clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into an eternity. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his tone skeptical. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" I didn't say a word. I simply opened my briefcase and began laying out the evidence on the table between us. First, the official bank statements, with the fraudulent transfers highlighted. Next, the corporate documents for A&R Properties. Then, the glossy 8x10 photos from the motel. His eyes widened as he looked at the pictures of Russell and Adrian kissing. Finally, I placed the small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. The room filled with their voices, my mother's cruel laugh, Adrienne's honeyed poison, and my husband's cold, calculating plans to destroy me. I watched Officer Johnson's face as he listened. It transformed from skepticism to shock, then to disgust, and finally, to a quiet, professional fury. He listened to the entire 20-minute recording without interruption. When it was over, he just shook his head slowly. He looked at me, and for the first time, he saw me not as a potential suspect, but as a victim who had meticulously built her own lifeboat. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice low. "This is no longer a divorce case. This is a criminal investigation." He stood up. "Please wait here." I sat alone in that sterile room for what felt like an eternity. Then, I heard a commotion outside. Raised voices. A door slamming. Through the small window in my door, I saw 2 officers escorting a handcuffed, sputtering Russell down the hall. His face was purple with rage. When he saw me, his eyes went wide with disbelief and pure hatred. An hour later, they brought my mother and Adrian into the station in the back of a squad car. Adrian was sobbing hysterically. My mother was silent, her face a mask of cold fury. The power trio had been dismantled. On the drive home, to a hotel, not my house, I felt a surreal sense of calm. The storm had broken. I pulled over to the side of the road and for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not tears of sadness or rage, but tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The weight I had been carrying was finally gone. The trial took place 6 months later, in the spring. Faced with the mountain of evidence I had collected, all 3 took plea deals rather than face a jury. Russell was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for fraud and embezzlement. My mother, for her role as a conspirator, received 2 years. And Adrian, due to her clean record, received 18 months of house arrest and 5 years of probation. I was in the courtroom when they were sentenced. Russell refused to look at me. Adrian just sobbed. But my mother stared at me. There was no remorse in her eyes. Only a cold, burning hatred for the weak daughter who had dared to fight back. In that moment, I knew I had not lost a mother. I had escaped a monster. The years that followed were about rebuilding. The divorce was finalized, and as Daisy had promised, I got everything: the house, full custody of Owen, and a court order for the restitution of every penny they had stolen. The first few months were strange. The house was too quiet. I had to change the locks, a simple act that felt monumental. My best friend Sylvia came over with a bottle of wine and 2 paint rollers. "This place needs a new soul," she declared. And so we spent a whole weekend painting the living room a warm, sunny yellow, laughing and blasting music, covering up the beige walls that had been my cage. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life. I went back to work at the library full-time and poured myself into it. A year later, when the head librarian retired, I applied for the position and, to my own surprise, I got the promotion. I started a book club for seniors and a literacy program for adults. I found joy in helping others find their own voice through stories. Owen and I settled into our new, quiet life. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. It was ours. He blossomed into a confident, kind young man, one who understood the difference between real strength and bullying. A few years ago, I got a letter with a return address from a low-security prison. It was from Russell. It was a rambling, self-pitying letter about how I had ruined his life. There was no apology. I tore it into 4 pieces and threw it in the trash without a second thought. I never heard from my mother or Adrian again, and I have made my peace with that. People sometimes ask if I regret it, if the revenge was worth destroying my family. The answer is always the same. I didn't destroy my family. It was already rotten from the inside out. All I did was turn on the lights. The woman I am today would be unrecognizable to the woman who stood trembling by that window. I own my home. I run a library. I've raised a wonderful son who is now getting ready for college. I am not afraid of anything. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment, the moment my world ended. It was the worst moment of my life. But it was also the moment I was born. They thought they were burying me. They didn't know I was a seed. They thought they were destroying me. Instead, they set me free. And that's a gift I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or unheard, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your strength gives me strength. Take care.